right, and thank you for joining us today on this edition of Wall Dropping History. I want to thank you so much for showing up. I got a really fun episode to do today. I'm doing a topic about somebody I had never even heard of, right? So like 24 hours, well, probably like 48 hours ago, I'd never even heard of this guy, right? So, and for me to have not even heard of this guy, it blew my mind, right? So today we're going to talk about this guy who I think is arguably the greatest explorer in human history, and I'd never even heard of him, right? Like, absolutely remarkable. So before we get going, let me go over a couple of little agenda notes. The first thing of note is, I just posted this in Google Classroom. Send in your stories. Make a video of yourself, basically just saying, hey, like if it was me, I'd say, hey, this is Mr. Waldrop. During the pandemic, I have been working out and working on my YouTube channel, or playing video games, whatever it is you've been doing during the pandemic. Just basically catch up, right? Let us get to know how you've been, what you've been doing, how life has been since the pandemic. So send that in, send it to my email, and we'll play that on Friday's edition of the show. So that's going to happen Friday. For the agenda, let's remove this. For the agenda, Monday we had the class meeting, right? So everybody met as a class. It's one big class, and I went over grades and how that works and all that stuff. If you were in my AP class, make sure you show up after this, because we're going to go over the AP stuff. I want to make sure y'all know about that. Today we're talking about the greatest explorer in history, right? So you can see that. Wednesday it's going to be Pandemic Wednesday. I'm going to pick a different pandemic, and we're going to discuss that and see what parallels we can draw, if any. A viewer requested topic, actually by my wife, this Thursday is the Battle of Thermopylae. Now, some of y'all may have been like, what? I don't remember her saying that. Stay tuned. You probably kind of heard about the Battle of Thermopylae. You just didn't know you did, right? You didn't know that's what it was called. And then Friday we're going to talk about the culture, and I decided to start with Africa. Mostly because there's a couple neat little things I want to bring up. So Friday we're going to talk about the culture of Africa. What is it like? What has it been like? What might it be like? Stuff like that, right? So that's what is going on. So today we're talking about the greatest explorer in the world, right? In human history. And that is this guy, right? That is this guy. And that is a guy named Ibn Battuta. Anybody learn a new recipe? Oh, so let me give some shout outs, right? Nirali, thank you for showing up. Quinn, thank you for showing up. Rachel, thank you. Jayla, thank you for showing up. Kaylin, thank you for showing up. Glad to have y'all with us. Anybody else in the comment section, go ahead and say something so I know to give you a shout out. But thank you all so much for showing up today. So, when we talk about famous explorers in history, you may have heard of some of these people, right? Maybe Marco Polo, and I'm not talking about the kids' game you play in the pool. I think we've all heard of Christopher Columbus, although if you take my AP class, you know kind of my stance on him. Vasco da Gama, Amerigo Vespucci, whom America is named after because he mapped North America. Ferdinand Magellan. Maybe you've got somebody else, right? Somebody else that you thought of as a famous explorer. Lewis and Clark, so on and so forth, right? What is something that all these people, and I'm curious if somebody can get it in the comment section, what is something you notice that all these people have in common? Anything you notice they all have in common? I'm going to leave that up for you real fast. What is something you notice them all having in common? Okay, well, hopefully somebody gets the guess and the number, picks it out. And of course, I think this guy right here, Ibn Battuta, is the greatest explorer in history. And we're going to talk about why, right? Okay, so Rachel made a comment. They're all Europeans, right? And of course, that's kind of my question. Which, by the way, this guy right here is kind of like a mixture of, if you read books, he's kind of like a mixture of the Odyssey, Candide, and Forrest Gump all kind of rolled in one, right? He's this guy who travels the world, has all these crazy adventures. He's kind of like on the scene constantly, during major events in history, right? And he is a primary source for a lot of it. And yet, y'all all had it on the nose. They're all Europeans. I kind of have another hunch why you may have heard of them. And it kind of asks the question of, why do you think you've never heard of Ibn Battuta? And I don't know who the 221 kid is. If you want to leave who this is in the comment section to get your shout out and to get your credit in Google Classroom, I'd appreciate it. But why is it you think you've never heard of this guy? Right? Why have you heard of all these guys, but not this guy? And I want you to think back to, what did all these guys have in common that maybe this guy didn't? And welcome, Patrick. Glad you could show. Are you also that 221 kid? Or is that a different person? So why is it you think they all are people you've heard of and are famous? You've heard of Vasco da Gama? I think there's an element of race to it, right? Let's go back. Let's look. Okay, what are all these guys? Mostly European white dudes. You got this guy, and he is a dark-skinned Arab guy. So I think that is a huge aspect to it. Oh, you've heard about him, but you didn't grow up here? Oh, okay, good. Okay, glad to have you with us, Patrick. Okay, so I think there's an element of that Eurocentrism aspect of history, right? We always learn history from the white European standpoint. And I think there's an aspect that this guy's an Arab. So I think there's that he kind of gets pushed to the sidebar of history, if you will. Okay, but today we're going to learn about him. So Ibn Battuta, he grows up as an Arab in Africa, right? So I want you to kind of get this. He is in Africa, but he's an Arab, right? So obviously, you know, when we talk about ethnicity and regionality, if somebody says they're African, your first assumption is, oh, they must be black. Oddly enough, the only person I know who's African is actually a white person, right? I'll say that I hang out with on a regular basis. I've had students that are from Africa that are black, but the person I probably hang out with the most is a white person from South Africa. So they're both African and white, right? Nirali in the comments section. She is Indian in ethnicity, but she is from Asia, right? So that she is Asian technically, but typically if you say, oh, they're Asian, you're thinking more somebody who looks like my wife or somebody who looks like Quinn, right? So I kind of want you to get that, right? He is Arab, but he is African, right? He was born in Africa, but he is Arab. Okay, so sorry I went in a long roundabout way of getting there. I just kind of wanted to specify that and get you to kind of get where I'm going, right? So the story is going to be in 1304, and this is around the time of the medieval world, right? You got knights and, you know, stuff like that, right? This is like King Arthur Day, right? And this is just 6 years after the death of Kublai Khan, right? So we're talking the time in which the Mongols are still kind of right at the top of their power, but they're starting to decline because they don't have their kind of head figure keeping it all together, right? So it's a troubling time, right? The Eastern world's kind of about to slip into chaos. The Western world is slipping into chaos. Things are getting crazy, right? It's like coronavirus all the time, right? So it's getting really crazy. So what are some things you think he might have been dealing with during the medieval era, right? So what are some things you think that might be some things that may be good or bad that are happening during the medieval era that he's going to have to deal with, right? So leave your comments in the comment section and I'll read them aloud. So he is a young child of a local judge, right? So in the Islamic world, they have a lot of judges that judge people based on Sharia law. And so he comes from a long line of judges. And so like his dad was a judge and his dad's dad was a judge and so on and so forth, right? That's kind of like his family business, if you will, right? Poverty. Yeah, that's definitely going to be an issue, right? War and disease. Yeah, we're going to talk a lot about that. But anyway, as he travels, bad hygiene. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of that. He would write a book of his travels. Forgive me if I don't pronounce this right. The Rihlah, not 100% sure. Yeah, no toothbrushes back then. So he's going to write a book of his travels, and he's well educated, right? He's going to be a well-educated guy, and he's going to come out of Morocco. Okay, so right here. So again, he's Arab growing up in Africa, right? And he's going to come out of Tangier, the city in Morocco, right? Yeah, lack of food, absolutely. So I ask the question of, how do you think his education, keep in mind, we're dealing with the Dark Ages, right? Medieval times. How do you think his education is going to set him apart, right? Being the child of a judge, he probably knows how to read when the vast majority of the planet does not, right? I mean, you talk about the one percenters, right? During this era, you are a one percenter if you can read and write. So at the age of 21, he's going to make his first travel to Mecca, right? Now keep in mind, he is Islamic. He is the child of an Islamic judge. And part of the Islamic faith is that you must travel to Mecca, right? And this journey is called the Haaj, right? It's a pilgrimage to Mecca. And he's going to do this multiple times, right? And it's part of his requirements of his faith. Now, he's going to set out at 21 years old alone. And here's a fascinating quote he said. He said, I set out alone, having received having neither fellowship or fellow traveler in whose companionship I might find cheer, nor caravan I might join, but swayed by an overwhelming impulse within me and a desire long cherished in my bosom to visit these illustrious sanctuaries. So he decides he's 21. Glad you could join us, Thomas. And he has a heart to travel. He wants to see the magic of the planet, right? And of course, obviously part of his faith, his first journey is going to be on the Hajj, right? So once he goes out, he visits the Hajj as is part of his faith. He's supposed to come back and return home. But he decides, no, I want to get more education. I want to go learn, right? Kind of think of it this way. You see a lot of students today. By the way, thank you, Kier, for joining us. Glad you could come. So he decides he wants to go out and join and kind of travel overseas to get an education, right? So he's going to travel and go get an education. So he would travel to Egypt and to Syria to meet with Sufi, which are kind of like Islamic mystics. And the kind of question I ask is, if you could travel overseas for college, would you, and where would you like to go, right? So maybe when you go to college, and obviously I realize it's expensive, it's possible nobody listening to this gets to do this. I didn't get to do it, but I would love to, right? Imagine you could travel to Italy or Germany or China or Russia, wherever, right? You pick the place. If you could travel to go to college, maybe you're an engineer and you're going to learn in India or something like that, right? If you could travel to another country to go to college, just 4 years, you're not being a citizen, you're not moving there, you're just broadening your horizons to learn from another perspective. Where's a country you would be down to go to college in? So he's going to travel to Damascus, and he starts racking up the degrees, right? I mean, just a giant list of them. Let's see, England. Noel says he doesn't know. Quinn says Korea or Japan. Oh, I would love Japan. I've been to Japan. Very fun. Italy. Oh, I would love to go. Particularly Florence. That'd be real fun. The Netherlands. That would be fun. Kind of cold for my taste. South Korea. Norali says she doesn't know. But anyway, so Damascus would be where he would learn a multitude of degrees. He starts piling up the degrees, right? Learns all this language and different legal court rulings and stuff like that, right? And he's going to start developing this reputation in the Islamic courts, right? Kind of like and I use this term loosely, but like a Judge Judy, right? And I don't want you to think of it in that term because he's not of that nature of like being like, and I'm not going to say Judge Judy's a joke, but she's more of a celebrity than an actual law person. Here's one I can think of. What is the name of the Kardashian dad that they got all their money from? Somebody leave it in the comment section. Y'all might know it. But kind of like that guy, right? He's not famous for being famous. He's famous for being a famous lawyer, right? Johnny Cochran kind of comes to mind. That type of fame, right? He's known in the court systems. He would return home to settle into the family business. So he kind of comes back home and he's supposed to start joining into the family business, right? Being a judge for his home family, right? But he decides, you know what? This ain't for me. I'm not just going to settle down and just be a local judge and spend the rest of my life here in Tangier. I need to go and travel, right? He's gotten a taste for it. Oh, Asil, there's no code. You just leave comments in the comment section. No code. Absolutely. Oh, Robert. Yes, Robert Kardashian. That's right. But yeah, Asil, no code. We move past that. We're just, because it makes this flow better. So just leave your answers in the comments section in YouTube. Anyway, so he decides to forego his family business and decides he's going to set out and travel the world, right? So here's my question. If you had a family business, right? Let's say your parents owned a restaurant or a movie theater, whatever, right? If your family owned a family business, would you carry on your family's business, or would you want to set out on your own? Right? Would you want to make a name for yourself, right? So I'm kind of curious what y'all think. Me and my wife have been watching this show called Kim's Convenience, which, by the way, it is hilarious. It's about a Korean family living in Canada. So it's like two different cultures blended into one. And it's a really fun show. But there's kind of this constant tension of, in Korean families, there's kind of a tradition of children carrying on the family business, right? And neither one of their children have any desire to run a convenience store, right? The son, I think, is a manager at a rental car place, and the daughter runs is trying to be a photographer. So it's this like constant struggle of, that kind of thing going on behind the scenes. So let's see. Set out on your own. Depends on the business. It depends on the business. So it looks like most of y'all want to set out on your own. And let me tell you, my dad was a forester. I love my dad. I do. I have zero desire to march through the woods and look at trees. In fact, as much as I love to learn, I think there's been this thing in my brain of not wanting to learn about trees just because my dad learned about it. But, I became a history teacher. And my dad loves history. We used to talk politics at the dinner table. So I know there's an element of that in there. But yeah, I definitely am in the boat of wanting to set out on my own. So anyway, while in Egypt, so he goes to Egypt and he begins to meet with sultans, right? All these different sultans of Egypt. And they're very generous to him, right? Because it's kind of like a celebrity judge in town, right? Like Robert Kardashian coming to visit, right? And some of them would decide to pay him for his travels. And while in Egypt, this is where he starts collecting his women, right? He's going to end up with a giant caravan of women. Now, I'm not endorsing this, but in some portions of history, not just the Islamic history, sometimes in Judeo-Christianity, you pick the religion, right? Throughout history, including in this era, it's not uncommon to have many, many wives, right? And he's going to be in that boat, right? He's going to have wives and concubines and all that stuff, right? So he goes to Egypt and he starts assembling his women, right? His little posse of women, right? And he would leave Egypt and go to Mecca again, right? So he's going to make a second journey to Mecca. And to do this time he's going to go through Iran into through the Arabian desert, right? Now, on his way back to Mecca, he would meet with the Mongol Khan Abu Said. Now, I want you to understand, Kublai Khan has just died. So his top generals are splitting up his empire. So this is a Mongol warlord guy who has carved up this chunk of what has just been the Mongol Empire. So he's still commanding Islamic Mongol troops. He still fights like a Mongol, horse archer, so on and so forth, right? So this is kind of his blending of meeting the Mongol world, right? And that's this guy who's ruling over. So let's see, Rachel says, I want to travel, though, get a chance as a kid to move and study abroad. Yeah, me too. Anyway, so he's going to meet this Mongol warlord, and he's going to charm him, right? This guy's like, wow, this guy's so wise, he's so educated. He kind of just falls in love with learning from this, traveling world scholar, right? And so they're going to develop a very close relationship. So why do you think this Khan would take to Ibn Battuta. And by the way, this is going to become a reoccurring theme, right? Where he travels, he meets the ruler of whatever place, and they're just like, man, we love talking to this guy. And the thing I kind of think of is, that commercial, the Dos Lackeys guy, the most interesting man in the world. And that's kind of what I think of. This guy that he's so interesting, right? He's traveled all over the place. He knows all this stuff. He's learned all this stuff. And it makes him very interesting to sit down and have a conversation with. And I'll tell you this is something that, is probably a reoccurring theme in my class that you may have noticed. But, I love interacting with people that have been to other countries, right? Because they always have fun stories to tell. I love hearing, and even if they have not, I've had a lot of people that maybe their parents are from another country, and they have a different perspective, right? And I love getting that, right? Because you learn so much fun stuff about learning about different people and the way they eat and the way they see the world and different religions and so on and so forth. It's really neat to see the way the human brain can develop into all these different paths, right? That you see, like, if you meet somebody who has grown up in China and even Vietnam, very different paths, right? Even though they have a very similar Asian background culture, right? I'm sure Nirali could speak to this, right? But, whether you're talking about people from Pakistan and people from India, right? They were all one country at one time. But they developed very unique cultures all on their own, right? So it's very interesting, and of course Rachel can talk about this, just Java and Sumatra, right? Two islands, part of the same country, very different cultures, very different traditional clothing and stuff like that, right? So it's really interesting to get that different perspective. And I think that's a big part of it, because you got to realize the average person in this era is not traveling, right? Most kings never leave their kingdom. I think during this time, most people were born, live, and die within a 10-mile radius, right? Having never left that 10-mile radius. So it's interesting to meet somebody. Like, I'll probably not get to travel anytime soon to India, right? Probably not. I'm telling you, I'm going to travel to India in my lifetime. I got a friend of mine that when he gets married, I'm 100% going there to participate in his wedding. I've already decided that's going down, right? But it's interesting to talk to people from India just to get the perspective of what it'd be like to visit the Taj Mahal, right? So I think that plays into it, right? To understand more, to see things from a different point of view. Now, once he's in Mecca, he's supposed to settle down, right? They've kind of got this arranged marriage for him. He's going to settle down and kind of like, if you're a judge, this is the best place to go to be an Islamic judge, right? This is the greatest. It's the creme de la creme of Islamic judges, like where you could go settle down. But he decides, that's not for me, right? It's like the opportunity to be a Supreme Court judge in America. And he decides, I'm not going to do it. And he decides, I don't want to just see the Islamic world. I want to go see other cultures, other religions. So he's going to travel to the Byzantine Empire. Now, this is what is left over of the Holy Roman Empire, right? Like the Caesars, right? Now, it should be of note that they still call themselves the Roman Empire, right? So if you were to go to Constantinople, which is where he's going to travel, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, they would still say they're the Roman Empire. And he wants to know the Christian world. And he's going to meet this princess, which I showed this picture of. And he's going to kind of fall for her, right? And she falls for him. And again, it's that forbidden fruit, if you will. She is as different from him as he has ever seen, and vice versa, right? So they have this like natural attraction to each other. And he's going to kind of charm the princess, right? And it kind of alludes to some stuff, but either way, he ends up kind of being charmed by her, right? So my kind of question is, why do you think they're so charmed by each other? And the thing I kind of think about, too, is, I have personal experience of this, right? Me and Rachel, different races, different cultures, different languages, grew up eating different foods, so on and so forth, right? But it's like all those differences are things that charmed me, right? Like, I've dated plenty of women in my life that did not introduce me to new foods, right? But the second I start dating Rachel, all of a sudden this entire, buffet of different foods and different ways of looking at things, and all the different language, right? Most people around the planet find an accent to be charming, right? Like if you're an American and you travel overseas, most people find it charming to hear that American accent. I know Rachel's joked about it, that she likes my southern accent. And to me, I'd never heard somebody that talked like her, right? I'd never heard anybody that had that accent. And, it's pleasing to the ear to hear somebody talk differently than you if you can remove the fear of bigotry. Like, once you can get that out of the way, it's really fun, right? One of the things she hates, but there's this kind of like puppet show with this music that they play, and it's called Wyong, right? And she has no interest in it, right? To her, it's like, it would be like somebody coming to America and being like, what is Sesame Street? And they're just obsessed with it, right? They're like, oh, this is so awesome, and wanting to watch Sesame Street, and you're like, man, that's for little kids. That's stupid. I don't want to watch Big Bird. But, if you've never been to America, you might find it really interesting to see this giant puppet walking around. So for me, that was a lot like going over there and seeing that, right? I was really fascinated. To her, it was like kiddish stuff. She didn't care about it, right? Let's see in the comment section, because they're so interested in each other, very different interests in each other. Let's see, Kara says, because they were completely different and they found each other so interesting they could learn from each other. Rachel says she doesn't hate it, it's just boring. They have very common interests, right? And that's a big thing, right? So he's going to decide, so he's starting to look like, I don't like square dancing, right? I hate square dancing. They used to make me do that when I was in middle school, and I hated it. So I have no interest. As a matter of fact, I don't even really like country music because I hated having it shoved on me as a little kid. Anyways, so he decides, even though it looks like he might start settling down with this princess, he decides, he wants to explore other cultures, other ways of living. He wants to continue his quest. So he leaves. It's no hard feelings, but he leaves the region behind, right? And he decides the next place he's going to go to is India. He wants to explore India. He wants to see the Hindu culture. He wants to travel the Hindu Kush mountains. He wants to travel the Indus River and just see the sights of India, right? Which I've never been. I've heard it's got some of the most beautiful mountain ranges, nature, places, right? So he decides he's going to travel to India. Now, India is still really suffering culturally from the Mongol invasion. The Mongols were really, really brutal on India, so they're having to recover from the wrath of the Mongols, right? So it's not a great time to travel to the cities, but if you're just traveling the culture, and I kind of wanted to show you, right? So these are some of the places he would travel, right? So these are the Hindu Kush mountains, right? Imagine traveling here, right? Just imagine sitting here on this bluff and being able to look out at this mountain range. Oh, it's got to be gorgeous, right? Just the nature, right? So this is the Indus River, right? Look at the water, right? Beautiful emerald color to it. Sights and sounds you've never seen. Question, do they have maps back then, and do you know when and do we have maps? Yeah, so they do have maps. Now, this would be a whole nother lesson on cartography, but you got to realize they don't have a lot of the math and science that we have now in cartography. So the maps are not what we have now, right? Like now we just send a satellite out and it uses satellite imaging to map up an area. If you look at it, let me show you this. The guy, let me show you this, right? Okay. This is so Americo Vespucci. Let me see if I can get a good map. Yeah. Okay, so Americo Vespucci, this is his map of the world. It's not terrible, right? It's not horrible, But that was the map, the guy that America's named after. This is the map that he came up with. It's not horrible, right? I mean, you can see that's definitely North America, right? That's definitely South America. But then you contrast it to the images of North and South America, right? So this is North and South America as we know it, and this is what America Vespucci had. So it's not horrible, right? But it's not what we're working with today, right? To kind of give you an idea. Okay, so my question is, are there any geographic landmarks you would ever want to visit? Maybe you would want to visit. Maybe you would want to visit the Grand Canyon. Maybe you would want to visit Niagara Falls. Maybe you would want to visit the Ganges River, the Nile, the Egyptian pyramids. Any geographic landmarks that you would want to visit. I know for me, I really want to go to Lombok and see the temples there and see the beaches. But are there any places you want to visit, right? Things like that that you would want to visit? If so, leave it in the comment section. So the Sultan of India decides, let me say this. He is afraid that the Sultan of India is going to capture him and kill him. Because again, he's keeping a journal of his travels, right? And as he's writing about India, India's really suffering, right? Obviously they're still torn to heck and back from the Mongols. The bubonic plague is going to start. So he's afraid that Ibn Battuta is going to make India look bad. So he kind of sends out this posse to kind of capture him and kind of trap him. And so Ibn Battuta, realizing that this is going to happen, he kind of says, okay, I'm not going to get away from this guy. Let me turn it around back on him, right? So he says, I'm going to go march on the palace of the Sultan, right? And this is the Sultan Muhammad. And the way I can best describe it is, it's very much like that scene in Aladdin, right? With Prince Ali. And he brings in this like giant parade of basically women. He's got just beautiful women dancing, real scantily clad, right? And he kind of acts it like, oh, you didn't capture me, I was coming to visit, right? And that way it's not like a hostile encounter. So like he kind of marches on the palace, but he doesn't have troops, he just got beautiful women, right? So he shows up and he's got this great caravan of beautiful women. And of course he starts sharing his women with the Sultan. And of course that kind of makes the Sultan like, man, I like this guy. He brings all these beautiful women from around the world. You got to realize, Ibn Battuta's been collecting women, right? He's got women from Africa. He's got Egyptian women. He's got white women, black women, Arab women, right? He's kind of got this like buffet of beautiful women for the Sultan to participate with, right? So it's kind of like this kind of like thing where he gets the Sultan to kind of like, oh man, I like this guy, right? So he decides, okay, I like this guy, I'm gonna let him on his way. Let me read the comments. So let's see. Thomas says he wants to visit Old Faithful, which I don't know if you heard. Old Faithful is not so faithful anymore. They've had some geological shifting, and it's starting to be a little iffy. It used to be on the dot. I think it was like every 96 minutes or something like that. But it's not quite as faithful as it used to be. Let's see. Nirali says Taj Mahal. Yeah, I want to see that so bad. Let's see. Quinn says Jeju Island. I don't know Jeju Island. Let me see. J-J-E. Jeju Island. Let me see. Okay. Oh, wow. Man, that's gorgeous. Let me see if I can show you. This is where she's talking about. Wow, look at that. Man, imagine jumping off that. Oh, look at those beaches. Yeah, so this is where I want to go. Look at that. Look at that. Man, look at those beaches. Yeah, I've been to Indonesia 4 times, never been to the beach. That is definitely... on my. But see, this is where I really want to go. This is where I want to go. Look at some of these temples. And there's another one. Let's see. This is where I want to go. This is where I really want to go. Man, look at this. Now, I'm a history guy, and I put this in the Srivijaya lesson. Some of these temples that were built, but man, I want to go there so bad. So, oh, look at that. It's like something out of a science fiction movie. But let's see. The Great Pyramid of Oh, so I've been there. I don't know if you saw. You'd have to go back and look at it when I talked about the plague that messed up the Aztecs. But I actually put the picture of me on that great sun temple. So yeah, it was so much fun. It's so cheap too. It was not expensive. It was like $100, and that included food and a tour of all the pyramids. Really, really cheap, real fun. Let's see, Bora Bora, Iceland, yeah, all good stuff. Okay. So the question I said is, does this remind you of any other thing you may have seen in entertainment, right? Where somebody kind of like kisses up and, brings in, a giant parade or something to kiss up to a king. Something like that, right? Obviously, Aladdin was the first thing that came to mind for me, but maybe y'all have another thought where somebody kind of uses beautiful women to get what they want or trick somebody. Alright, so the Sultan fell in love with this guy, right? He's like, man, this guy is so interesting. He brought all these beautiful women for me. He really hits it off with this guy. And he likes him so much, he says, you know what? I'm going to load you up with treasures. And I'm going to make you my Chinese ambassador. Right? So he goes from being on the run, hiding from the Sultan, to now being his best buddy. And he's being given all these treasures to take to China. On his way to China, he's going to be attacked by bandits, which is very common in this era. And keep in mind, the Khans who used to protect the Silk Road, they're starting to fall apart. So that protection is starting to go away. So he's going to be attacked by bandits, and he loses everything. He loses his treasures, he loses his women, he loses it all, right? He is now a penniless pauper. Right, he is he goes from Prince Ali back to Aladdin type situation, right? So he's starting over from ground one. So my question is, what factors do you think make traveling to East Asia so dangerous? And keep in mind, we did have those protections, right? It was protected by the Mongols and other empires. Those protections are starting to go away. So what are some dangers? Obviously bandits, but what are some factors you think that make it so dangerous to travel this route? Leave your comments in the section below. Okay, so he would be caught up in a local war on the southwest coast, right down here, and I'm going to butcher this, in a place called Kozhikode, I think. Anyway, but it was Calicut. It's now the other name. I'm terrible with enunciating. Search. Let me see. OOTY. Let's look. Riley says she's been to this place. Let's look at the images. Oh wow! Look at that! Wow! Look at that! Look at the steam rolling over the hills. Oh, that's cool. Wow. Look at that. By the way, that yellow is not dirt, it's silt, which makes that yellow color. Oh, that looks cool. Yeah, I'd love to go there. I have to put it on my list of places to go whenever I am able to go to India. But yeah, danger of being killed, different languages and culture, weather could be a problem. Okay, so Having lost everything the Sultan gives him, he's like, man, I better get out of Dodge. Because the Sultan's going to feel like, he might be really angry that I lost this treasure that he gave me to go be this goodwill ambassador to China. So he decides to head to the Maldives. Now, the Maldives are a series of islands. They're an archipelago. It's actually one of the largest archipelagos as far as just number of islands. So he decides to move to the archipelago, and there's a lot of like little mini kingdoms that are all kind of collected together. While there in the Maldives, he is penniless, right? He's starting over from scratch. However, you got to realize he still has his name. He still has, and they probably don't know him by name, but he still has his education, right? He's traveled the world. He knows all this vast knowledge, right? So even though he's starting from scratch, he soon starts getting involved in politics and starts to move up. And before you know it, he's marrying into the ruling family, and it looks like they're about to make him the Sultan. And so I kind of made this kind of image of it. He goes from being, Prince Ali back down to Aladdin, and just through education, it kind of functions like his genie, and he's becoming Prince Ali again, right? And so the question is, what factors do you think led to him rising in power so fast? And the thing I kind of think back to is, you see this all the time. Like at one point in time, what's his name? The boxer bit off somebody's ear. Mike Tyson. He was penniless. He spent all his money on his legal defense, and now today he's rich again. Just because of his name, right? We see that happen all the time. Somebody just cashing in on their name. Maybe they're real smart. You've often seen people that had a business, and their business go under, and just through connections, they rise back up again. Thank you for joining, Ashley. Glad you could have show up. So, his education, right? His education is so huge. So it allows him to understand the law. It allows him to be able to speak well. One of the things I always tell people is, a lot of times people say, why do I need to learn history? And I talk about a lot about these camera check moments that you'll have in life, right? So if you think about it in life, it's usually a collection of these things I call camera checks. I actually stole that from an old boss of mine, William Stitt, if he ever watches. But anyway, he told me about this thing called camera checks, right? If you think about it, we don't look at life in its whole totalitarian picture, right? In its whole total picture. We think about it in camera checks, right? If I tell me about your childhood, you tell me about single solitary events, right? Like if I tell me about what you've been doing in coronavirus, you're not going to tell me everything, like, well, I go to bed at night and I get up in the morning and brush my teeth. It's just the minutia of day-to-day life, right? It's those specific major events, right? And, sometimes in life, you may be working around a boss and you're up for a promotion. And he may mention, like, oh, man, did you hear about what happened with Kim Jong-un? And you don't know anything about it, right? Maybe you listening don't know anything about it. He may or may not be dead. It's a real weird story. But you don't know anything about it, and your boss thinks, well, maybe he just doesn't follow politics. And then later on, he starts talking about, like the Egyptians did, building the pyramids, and you're like, I don't know anything about the Egyptians. It's like, how do you not know anything about the Egyptians, right? And those events start piling up, and even if you don't think about it, your boss starts developing this opinion of you of, man, this guy's a moron. He didn't know anything. And it can play a factor in you getting a promotion. And I myself do that, whether I mean to or not. But, if every time I interact with somebody who's under me, they don't know anything. Think about it in my standpoint, in my line of work. If I'm a department head and the teacher underneath me doesn't know anything about history, that's going to affect my opinion of him, right? So it kind of works like that. The fact that he knows all this stuff makes it very easy for him to move up. So they decide they want to make him a sultan, and he kind of has this buyer's remorse of like, I don't know if I want to spend the rest of my life stuck in this little island in the Maldives. So he decides he's going to abandon his life, right? And just in the middle of the night, he sneaks off and decides to leave and move to Sri Lanka. Now, he has a brother-in-law there, and he actually gives his brother-in-law information that helps his brother-in-law attack the Maldives. And so this is a really cold move, right? So, like, The people in the Maldives love him so much, they're getting ready to make him their Sultan. And he actually hops out of town and helps Sri Lanka attack the Maldives. Right? They kind of took him in when he was a penniless pauper. They made him, this like huge guy in their society. They were getting ready to make him their Sultan. And he sneaks out like a thief in the night and uses the information he knew about the area to help the people of Sri Lanka try to conquer the Maldives. It's kind of like this really, the only thing I think of to kind of compare it to would be like if you're sitting there and your wife is telling you about somebody she doesn't like at work, and that you know that this person does not get along with your wife. If you kind of like sneak out in the middle of the night, abandon your wife, go hook up with this other girl who's your wife's greatest enemy, and start using all the secrets you know about your wife to help her enemy stab him in the back. It's kind of like that. Man, it's just cold, right? So he does that, and of course, obviously, that makes him very popular in Sri Lanka. So, fearing that the Maldives would not just try to target him, Sri Lanka, they would go after him, right? They start trying to find assassins to take him out. He's like, I better get out of town, right? So he decides, I'm going to keep my travel up. I was heading to China to go to Beijing. I now have all the riches I acquired in the Maldives, all the riches I acquired in Sri Lanka. I've kind of rebuilt my fortune, if I will. I'm going to go back on the road again. And he decides he's going to make good on his journey to Beijing, right? So he decides, I grew up in the Arab world under Islamic law, right? I've traveled all over Africa. I grew up in Africa. I've traveled all over the Arab world. I've traveled all over the Christian world of the Byzantine Empire. I've traveled all along and seen the Hindu world of India. I want to go travel to the Far East and see that culture, right? So on his way there, he's going to stop off in Sumatra. Now, Sumatra is that island of the Srivijaya of Indonesia, right? That island, the one we talked about. And there, he is just going to be blown away by the beautiful women there, right? And Rachel always kind of jokes about how that's kind of the reputation of Indonesia, that all these people would go to Indonesia and like steal their beautiful women and take them home, right? And of course, this guy's no exception, right? Keep in mind, he's used to traveling with this harem of women, right? This giant entourage of beautiful women. And so he goes to Sumatra and starts picking up women, right? He just gets his congregation of women to bring. And he's going to decide to head on to China, and now he's got a caravan of beautiful women going with him. There he would stay for a few years, right? And he'd learn all he could learn about China. This is the Emperor Huizong, who is taken over. Keep in mind, he's kind of part of the Mongol Empire, but not really, right? He would say he was head of the Chinese Empire, but he was also part of the Mongol Empire. He's going to stay there a few years. Now, he used to have this thing where he would never travel to the same place twice, right? Other than obviously Mecca. He never wanted to go to the same place twice, right? Life's too short. I don't want to visit the same place twice. I want to see as much as I can. However, he decides he really got a taste for those Indonesian women, and he travels back to Indonesia, right? He's like, I got to pick up some more of those Indonesian women. They're going to come in handy later on. So he's already got an entourage of Indonesian women. He goes back to Sumatra to pick up some more women. So now he's kind of got his like giant entourage of women, right? So the kind of question I asked, right? And keep in mind, there probably is not the choice of these women, right? He probably kind of purchases these women. But I kind of did have this interesting thing, kind of going back to the thing I said about Rachel, saying that, that's the stereotype of all these men would come to Indonesia. And the kind of resource that they were always trying to pillage is the Indonesian women, right? But the kind of question I asked was, what is the furthest you would move to be with somebody? Would you travel to another country? Would you travel to another state, another city? Maybe you wouldn't travel at all. Maybe you're like, man, I love Baton Rouge. I never want to leave. I'm going to stay here the rest of my life. I'm not moving, right? So I'm kind of curious, where's the farthest you would go to be with somebody? Would you travel to the other side of the earth? And, if Rachel's still in the comment section, she's on the other side of the planet. You cannot get farther from here than where she is. I used to have this joke when she and I were dating. Was for me to find somebody farther away, I'd have to be dating somebody on the moon, because literally the other side of the planet would be the Indian Ocean, and if you swam to shore, it would be the island of Java. So I'm kind of curious, what are your thoughts? Would you travel to go be with somebody if you're in love with them? So leave your comments. I'm curious what y'all have to say about it. You'd move to another state. That's as far as you'd move. You wouldn't go to another country. Okay. You'd move to another country. So Quinn would move to another country, but not Kiera. She would move to another state, but not another country. So anyway, he decides to head back. Right. He's had his fill of the Asian world. He wants to head back and be part of the Islamic world again. Let me see. Patrick said he would move to another country. Nirali said she would move to another country. Thomas would move to another country. I'm kind of curious too. Is there parts of the world you would love to move to, and other parts of the world you wouldn't move to? Like, so for me, it's conditional, right? Like, obviously, if down the line I don't have kids here in America, but let me say this: if I could take my kids with me, I've often joked about, and maybe we do end up retiring in some island in Indonesia, but I probably wouldn't want to move to like Saudi Arabia. Just because I don't think they care for Americans there. So, I'm kind of curious about that too. Are there places you would move to, places you would not? So leave your comments in the comment section on that too. So anyway, he decides to head back to Egypt, and on his way, he starts to really encounter the bubonic plague, right? Like, it's everywhere. I mean, it's really taken its toll on places like India, Europe, the Byzantine Empire. Remember the Justinian flu? It came back, right? And my kind of question is, why do you think this is especially scary for somebody like Ibn Battuta to witness the Black Death? And keep in mind, he is in that 1 percentile people that have read. So he's probably read up on the Justinian flu. He probably has an understanding of plagues and pandemics and so on and so forth. This is probably especially scary for him because the average person doesn't get it. And so I think this guy kind of gets it. How scary it is to have a bubonic plague. So he decides, all right, so I've traveled east, I'm going to travel west, and I'm going to just go visit Spain. Doesn't have a reason to. He just heard about, this is right around the time of the running of the bulls, right? So it's like the next big cultural event. And he's like, man, I want to go see what that's all about. So he travels to Spain to see the running of the bulls. And I kind of had this question of, and I'm going to ask the question in just a second, but I kind of wanted to show you some of these other modern events, right? So like a cultural celebration, if you will. Like St. Patrick's Day in Dublin, Ireland. They dye the rivers green, and there's just green everywhere. Everybody's decked out in green. And I'm sure y'all probably have seen it like on St. Patrick's Day. You're supposed to wear green or they'll pinch you. Another one I thought of is Carnival in Venice, Italy. And of course, you can see how Venice celebrates Carnival. And by the way, Carnival is just Mardi Gras, right? It's the same basic principle, but they were celebrating it long before we did, right? Oktoberfest in Munich, Germany. Look, I want to visit Germany. I don't really care about drinking beer, but it's kind of like this giant festival to get together and wear traditional German clothing, lederhosen, and just try the different beers that Germany has to offer. This is one I was looking up. It's called Lo Tomita. This is in Brunel, Venice, Spain. And it's basically, and I'm not sure the origins of this, I hadn't looked it up, but it's like this giant festival where they smack each other with tomatoes and just wallow in the tomato juice. Does not look fun to me. That looks kind of nasty to me, but who knows? Maybe you like slipping and sliding in tomato juice. The running of the bulls in Spain. That's one. It's the one he took to. I don't know if I would want to do that. Have a bull chasing after me. I'm good on that. The lantern festivals in Thailand. Of course, if you've seen Tangled, you've probably seen that scene of the lantern festival. Carnival in Rio de Janeiro. I always, whenever I talk about Latin culture, I always want to show a clip of this. but it's really hard because it's hard to find images that don't have nudity. But it's kind of like Mardi Gras with even more nudity. But man, they go all out in their floats. I mean, it is world class in floats. Chinese Lunar New Year all over East Asia. I've kind of seen this, and of course you can see them having those festivals here in the States too. Glad you could join us, Mr. Raby. And of course, anybody's ever experienced this. They had a holy festival in Baton Rouge, by the way, and of course it's so much fun. It's like music and dancing, but everybody sprays this like colors all over the place, and so it's got these like beautiful, vibrant colors everywhere. If you ever get a chance, they do it really good here in Baton Rouge, down by the courthouse. Hopefully Corona will go away and we can do it again. But it's so much fun. Little kids are running around throwing colors at each other. Man, Joe loved it. He went ballistic throwing colors at everybody. And you throw colors at everybody, right? It's not like a thing like you just walk up and you just smear colors all over everybody. It's a ton of fun. But I want to go to India and do it right and see how they do it in India at some point in time. So my question is, are there any cultural festivals you want to witness? Right? Maybe it's one I left out. You know, maybe it's something somewhere that you want to experience that culture and how they do it there. So I'm curious. Of course, Rachel already kind of jumped in and said she wanted to go to the Lantern Festival. Yeah, me too. That'd be real fun. But are there any cultural festivals you would want to witness? If so, leave it in the comment section. I'm curious what y'all have to say. Or maybe one that you've experienced that I've never heard of. So if you got one of those too, leave that in there. So after Spain, he would hear about this guy named Mansa Musa, which I thought about doing a topic on him. He's a really fascinating character. So while in the Sudan, he travels to Sudan, he would be taken prisoner. He's got kind of an angry younger brother who takes over when Mansa Musa dies. And this is Mansa Suleiman. So Mansa Suleiman is the new head of this new Mali empire. And Mansa Suleiman is going to be like the angry brother of Mansa Musa. Let's see, to be honest, all of them? Yeah, me too. Me too, Thomas. I would love to visit all of them. I played with water and water balloons and a little bit of color. Yeah, I tell you what, I'm going to hate it if Corona ends up taking the Holy Festival. And I think that was recently, too, I think it already took the Holy Festival, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it was. It was, now that I think about it. We were supposed to go. That's one of the hardest things. Rachel is a world-class expert of, Day of the Dead. I forgot of that one. Dia de la Morta. That giant celebration. Yeah, that'd be fun. But anyway, so Rachel's kind of like the master finding these different events for us to go to. She's really good at that. And, we have them all set in our calendar. And one of the hardest things about coronavirus is the constant reminder. I like to put all the movie premieres in my calendar, and that constant reminder of like, you were supposed to go to Holy. You were supposed to see the premiere of Black Widow and blah, blah, blah. And, seeing all these events I was supposed to go to but can't. But yeah, I should have put that in there. Let me, I got to add that in there. And if you've ever seen Coco, that's a great movie to show it. But yeah, here let's see these images. Oops, undo that. How did I do that? Okay. But yeah, these great images of Dia de Muertos, the Day of the Dead. And of course, if you've seen Coco, you've seen a good representation in culture. But they all dress up and kind of honor the dead. It's really, really fun. So yeah, that's another one I'd love to go to. Look up. Let me see. Look up Jimber Festival. Oh my goodness! Look at this. Look at that. I'm curious if Rachel, if you're in the comment section, if you'd wear that. Wow. Look at that. Man, I want to wear one of those things. I want to look like a giant Garuda walking around. Yeah, look at these costumes. It's like Comic-Con only for Indonesian culture here. Oh, look at that one. Oh, that's wild. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I would participate in that. Okay, so he's going to meet up with this Musa Saliman. Now, the reason I thought about sharing with y'all this guy, as far as we know, this may be the richest set of brothers in human history, because they're going to find the world's largest suppository of gold. In fact, at one point in time, and he liked to share it too, his brother did, Mansa Musa. At one point in time, he's going to bring so much gold to Egypt that it's going to destroy their economy. So, I mean, this dude is just like, man, he's got gold on gold on gold, right? Most of the gold we have came from Africa. So, anyways, so he goes down there and he visits this Mansa Musa, and of course his brother's gone. His brother, Musa Saliman, is in charge. And so my kind of question was, how does this draw parallels from a certain Marvel movie, right? And again, we talked about this with the comparison to Black Wall Street, if you remember that lesson. But, you know, if I were to tell you about this African country that's got this resource that makes them richer than anything, actually, it was a fascinating thing. I looked it up, and they have this kind of like fictional, let me see if I can show it to you, richest comic book character. And they had this funny thing, let me show it to you, of the richest comic book characters in all of fiction, right? It's got Professor X and stuff like that. And the one that they had was the richest was Black Panther, right? T'Challa. And they had his worth estimated between 500 billion and 90 trillion, because he owns his own country, but it's also a country with the only world supply of vibranium, right? But yeah, I kept thinking, I wonder if there was an element of Mansa Musa involved, because he was supposed to be this like great wise leader, real smart, stuff like that, right? His brother, not so much. He was kind of a mean, angry dude. But I thought that was fascinating. So anyways, he's going to decide to head back home. He does. He heads back home. He spends some time back home in Morocco, in Tangier. Monaco and Tangier, and then decides he's going to head out on one last journey to travel the world. Doesn't tell anybody where he's going, and history never hears from him again. We don't know what happened to him. Obviously, he's dead by now. So my question is, what do you think happened to him? And of course, your guess is as good as mine. But what do you think happened to him? You think he got killed by bandits? Do you think he just decided to go live somewhere else or travel the world and never reported it back? So, you know, your guess is as good as mine. Curious what you think about it. So his legacy that we know of, he's going to meet with at least 60 world leaders, right? Like whether it's a sultan or an emperor or king or whatever, right? And as far as we know, I mean, that is historic, right? His work would be the primary source for our knowledge of the Islamic world at the time, right? It's the definitive source of how we know about Islam at that era. Maybe he fell in love and stayed somewhere. It could be. As well as his knowledge of history at the time. It's how we know about the bubonic plague and how we know about the fall of the Mongol Empire. So much knowledge of that era that we got from him, right? So why do you think he's the biggest primary source of the Islamic world? And it's because he traveled it, right? He traveled all over the place. He is a primary source, and not many people were as educated as he was. He may have been the most educated person on the planet at the time. And for him to provide that primary source. His account is shockingly corroborated by other people, right? So we know for a fact he wasn't just making this up, right? So like the Mongols talk about him, Chinese talk about him, Indonesia talks about him. Rachel's talking about he's famous in Indonesia. She told me about that last night. He would travel 75,000 miles in his life. And look at this. Look at all these places he travels. Right? Look at the routes he takes. Right? And of course, most of these he never is going to travel. So he starts in Morocco, travels all over here, all over here. He's just all over the planet, right? Almost never going to the same place twice. And one of the things I thought was fascinating to show you, though, is to show you how far we have come as a civilization, right? So, for most of recorded history, this guy right here was the most traveled explorer on the planet. And of course, I feel like I've made a strong case. The greatest explorer on Earth, right? In human history, greatest explorer. But to show you how far we've come in technology, he traveled 75,000 miles in his life. Just in going to Indonesia. Just in going to Indonesia and back. I have beaten him. I've traveled 78,416 miles. Just going to Indonesia and back. That's not going to Mexico or Canada or all the other places I've been. Just Indonesia and back, Indonesia back, Indonesia and back. So that's kind of fascinating to me that we have traveled so far in technology that even I, the regular run-of-the-mill high school teacher, have traveled more than the greatest explorer in history. And again, unlike him, I'm not stopping and meeting all these world leaders, but still, it's just kind of a fascinating little thing of look how far we've come in technology. Yeah, he made a normal life and blended with the crowd. Maybe. So my thing is, the fact that he was able to travel the world and stay safely, what does that tell you about the Islamic world at the time? It's not what we thought it was. Now, I know he did have that little brush up in India, but it's not what we think it was. Like, we think about the Islamic world, and it's like all this violence and chaos. It's pretty safe, especially when you compare it to like the Christian world at the time, where it's like you got medieval knights killing each other everywhere. But it's pretty safe at the time. It kind of breaks that stereotype of, the Islamic savagery. It's just not being true. Now, he's the only person recorded to have traveled all three of the major trade routes at the time. The Silk Road, the Trans-Saharan route, and the Indian Ocean route. The only one. Marco Polo does not. Now, he's going to mostly do the Silk Road. So he's the only one to travel all three of the major trade routes of the planet at the time. So I'm going to ask this question. I originally, before this morning, I had it worded with, where would you like to go? I am begging you, if there's one thing you ever take away from meeting me and having my class, travel the world. Even if you only get to leave the country one time. You will thank me. I promise you, everybody that is watching this that goes and visits another country, you may not be able to remember to think to tell me, but if we ever bump into each other again in life and you have traveled, you're going to say, thank you for telling me that, Mr. Waldron. That was the best advice anybody ever gave me. Travel the planet. So my question is not where would you like to go, where are you going? Where are you going to go? Right? You should travel. I promise you I'm going to travel. Where are you going to go in your life? Where are you going to visit? I want you to make that decision yourself. I'm going to go on vacation at some point in time in my life. I'm going to travel somewhere. Where are you going? Everywhere you can. Okay, Dubai. Yeah, that would be fun. I want to go to Dubai. Okay, and that's my kind of going away lesson, so to speak, is I want to know where are you going. Not where would you like to go, where are you going? So leave that in the comment section below. So many places. Japan. Oh, you're going to love Japan. You're going to love it, Mr. Raby. Okay, so that's going to do it for me. Unless you have any questions in the comment section below, please leave them. But otherwise, that's going to do it for today's episode of Wall Dropping History. Rachel says London. It's very expensive in London. Let's see. Everywhere where I grow up. Yeah, me too. I'm with you, Thomas. But where specifically? Where's number one on your bucket list of places you want to visit? I'm curious what y'all have to say. Give me your number one. What's your number one place to visit? I want to go to Germany really bad. Obviously, we're probably going to end up going to Indonesia first again. But I want to see, I've been to where Rachel's from. I want to see where my family grew up in. Oh, Sherlock. Go see Baker Street. 224 Baker Street. But yeah, okay, so Patrick says Italy. Kind of curious where your audience think. So if that's all you have for questions, if you have any questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section. Greenland. Yeah, Trump is trying to buy Greenland. But if you got any comments, leave them in the comment section or questions. Samoa. Yeah, that'd be a good one. Yeah, I'd like to see Samoa. Let's see. Greenland. Very cool. All right. Sorry, 221B Baker Street. I almost said 4. But thank y'all so much for your dedication to your education, for showing up and joining me today on this edition of Wall Dropping History. I appreciate y'all all showing up. So unless y'all have any other questions, that is going to do it for today's episode of Wall Dropping History. And thank you for joining us. Hong Kong. Yeah, that's a good one. I've been to Hong Kong now. I didn't really get to go around Hong Kong, but I've been there. So Norali says, do we have to make it? You never have to do any of this stuff. It's just for fun. But I would love a video of y'all just, hey, what's going on? I've been doing fill in the blank. I'm sure y'all done all kinds of interesting things. Africa, okay, that'd be interesting. What part of Africa, right? That'd be curious. I definitely want to go to South Africa. That'd be really fun. Or maybe Kenya. That'd be fun too. I kind of want to go to Egypt to see the Egyptian pyramids. I've heard good things and bad things. So I've had some friends that went and said they loved it. I've had some friends that went and said that they do not like Americans there. So I don't know. I don't know. I might go. I definitely want to see the pyramids. I know that. But anyways. Alright, so that's going to do it for today's episode of Wall Dropping History. Thank you again for your dedication to your education. If you are in my AP class, I'm about to start that, and so join me over there. So until next time.